Hello, and greetings. This is Coach Fleischer. This is Kinesiology 214, the virtual lab for legs. Now, with legs, you got to understand with legs, there are a number of different muscles you can use or evaluate in leg movement. And for this class, what we're really going to focus on are these main five: glutes, quadriceps, hamstrings, calves, tibialis anterior. Sure, we can get into glute, max, med, and min. We get into all four of the quadricep muscles over here. We get into the actual biceps femoris, semimembranosus and semitendinosus. And then you have gastroc soleus for the calves and tibialis anterior, the muscles on the front of the shin. But for the sake of this class, we're not going to be going for that much of a deep dive. You'll be doing that, I believe it's in 236. We're really going to dig in and get into these different muscle groups and be able to pick those out in different parts of your class assignments. But for this class, we're looking at glutes as a group, quadriceps as a group, hamstrings as a group, calves as a group, and I'll kind of differentiate those because usually there's some confusion regarding gastroc and soleus. And then just tibialis anterior, I'm giving a light to it, but I'm not really going to spend a lot of time on it. Now, just so you know, going forward for the rest of your educational process, usually when you see renderings of the human body, it's of the right side of the body, and that helps you to really get a better and quicker visual as to where this muscle is and kind of orienting this muscle on the body. So if you know this is on the right side of the body, it has to be on the posterior side. If this is on the right side of the body, you know this is the anterior side of the body. Right side of the body, you know it's the back side of the body. And if it's the right side of the body, and this is confirmed by showing the big toe down here, then it's the posterior side of the body. So just understand that when you look at anatomical renderings, that's the way I do it, and I know the medical profession does it as well. It's more often than not, 99.9% of the time, unless you have somebody who throws you a curveball or they want to teach something specific, it's going to be the right side of the body, and that will help you orient. Okay, is this a picture of a posterior or anterior group of muscles? Well, it's the right side of the body, right side of the body. This has to be the front, so it's got to be anterior. Okay, cool, got it. So you can kind of go ahead and pick out then, is this muscle group quadriceps or is this muscle group hamstrings? Well, let's see. This picture shows right side of the body. It's got to be anterior side of the body, so it's got to be quadriceps. So it just becomes easier to figure that out. When you look at the muscles of the legs, there's so many of them, so as a result, there's so many different ways to work legs, and this is not going to be exhaustive in this video, not a chance. So what I really want to get across is showing a bunch of sagittal plane oriented type movements that are basically multiple joint in nature with a couple single joint exercises. But I stayed away from leg extension, leg curls, because usually those are pretty darn self-evident to people and pretty self-evident to your clients. They can just hop on a piece of equipment and go. The other ones I want to talk about are the main ones that you'll see in the gym. And just as a side note, most of your clients will come in and they'll be very quad dominant, from getting out of a chair, not using their glutes, walking up and down stairs, using their quads a ton. They're going to be very quad dominant and have weak glutes, and you'll have to work with these people to kind of like reposition and re-educate them as to where the heck the glutes are. So if we look at these two exercises, right? One of which is a leg press, the other one is a squat. And between the two, it's pretty easy to compare. I'm like, okay, it's a multi-joint leg exercise, but when you look at this in terms of exercise itself, what plane is it in? Sagittal. Okay, what are main muscles? Legs. More specific, what are they? Well, quadriceps, a little bit of glutes, etc. And then upper body, lower body, that stuff I'm pretty sure you can figure out. Now, when you look at this, you'll notice I am in a position where my back is supported, my hips are already at just about 90 degrees. Here I got a little bit of hip bend, but not as pronounced here. When I do the exercise, there is no change of trunk flexion due to transitioning a bar. It's all knee and hip articulation. This will be knee and hip articulation with some ankle and with some ankle as well. And so in this exercise, you have loading that happens with the bar on the shoulders that forces the erector spinae to do some work here to help stabilize and rack a bar across the shoulders, which you don't have here. So let's play this out. He's warming up over there. He's getting dialed in. And this one I'm very deliberate in terms of how I show this. So dropping down and coming down. Now when I teach squat, the way I normally cue it is this. I'll have individuals, once they get in here and get squared away, I have them think hips back first. So often you'll have, especially athletes who play basketball, their first inclination is to bring the knees forward like they're playing defense in basketball. The cue that I give people on a squat, it's hips back first. That hip back position allows the glutes to fire, gets people out of being quad dominant. They're going to do some quad work, no doubt, but allows them to be more glute dominant. And also mechanically, it keeps the knees from coming out over the tips of the shoes. Believe me, the knees are going to bend. That's going to happen just as a part of the process of the hips going back. But when you say bend the knees, bend the hips, people will bend their knees first, and the knees will go way out in front of the tips of the shoes. Go with the cueing of glutes, right? Go hips back first, and the knees will follow. Let's see if we can get this guy to get some leg work in here real quick, and then I'll move on. Comes up underneath. And that's another little sidebar that I do, just so you know, with squats. And I can spend an hour talking squats. I get in, I use a mark on the bar, and I address an approach from a straight arm position far away, so I know I'm even on the bar. I don't try to just get underneath and grab the bar at the same time. I'm actually holding onto the bar, and you'll see me get under the bar as I address an approach, bring my chest to the bar, drop straight down, don't dip my head, and that way I know I'm right in line in the middle of the bar, so I'm not going to tip over. Hips go first with the knees. It's subtle. Hips go back, and the knees just follow. All right, guys? These two, stiff leg deadlift, single leg, and then a single leg bridge. What's the plane? It's sagittal again, all right? One thing you have is when you get into single leg exercises, because you have this unilaterality, right? So you have this one side of the body's working by itself. You do have a little bit of transverse work that sneaks in, but it's not pronounced. And that's just because you have the asymmetrical loading seen, especially if you're holding a dumbbell in the left hand over here. Right now we're holding a bar, so my torso wants to stay pretty darn straight, but I'm on one foot. So as a result, I'm going to catch a little bit of transverse work, subtle, in the midsection. With this, you'd like to have the hips stay square with the floor as I bring my hips up. And so as a result, because I'm on single leg, there's a little bit of transverse work that has to happen. Let's go let this guy get some work over here. Now your difference on this, if you look at the two, I have contact points of the shoulders, and the foot. Here I have my contact patch is the foot. So degree of difficulty, this is usually pretty high for people who have a little balance issue. Over here, not so bad. Now ways you can change and progress and regress this exercise, you can add a little bit of manual resistance on the knee by slightly pushing the hand. You can add some manual resistance by slightly pushing on the hip or pushing on the other hip. The cue I often give people on this is when their foot is flat on the ground, they'll have the ankle by the opposite knee. That's a good starting off point. You can have the foot a little bit further forward, a little bit further back for just some minor adjustments, some fine tuning, but usually it's ankle by the knee is where I go with this. And the other thing I'll do is I'll have people have both feet on the ground and I'll push. Matter of fact, maybe I'll shoot a video for you guys on that. I'll have people actually push and almost have a rocking position, and the flow through is a tilt of the pelvis, anterior and posterior. Let that play, let that play. All right, so if we move this on to clamshell, pop this, one more, up you go. So with the clamshells, so often your clients will come in and they just don't have glutes. You know, they're weak in the glutes, and you have to work on this just to stabilize the hip joint first before you have them do heavy squats. For something like this, I like the barbell supine hip extension exercise, or hip thrust as it's commonly known. It's still a supine, or it's a supine exercise, and it's sagittal plane. And I like this in terms of getting the glutes to fire effectively, but it is sagittal plane. We're talking glutes. We're talking a little bit of hamstring on this one as well, lower body, of course. And I like this for sometimes when I have athletes who have difficulty with their glute development. I'll bring this one in, and let's let this guy here. And so in this position on the bottom, I'll have them really work on squeezing the glutes and get that hip extension, so that will translate into hip extension on squat, but more importantly, hip extension on power clean. Your wrestlers love this exercise in terms of being able to grab somebody use the hips to actually throw the person. So they actually work this midsection and get the hips nice and strong to throw. I like this one also for football players for tackling, because if you bring the hips when you tackle, you're really going to work. You're really going to bring them down. Same thing with blocking. You know, you got to bring the hips to the party when you start talking about athletic movement. Over here, the plane of movement changes a little bit, right? So if you look at this, it's no longer sagittal plane, it becomes more transversy, and we're hitting the glutes, which are abductors and external rotators. Here we're doing an abduction version. I'll replay that one more time. And I will literally have people do this exercise as a warm-up, 20 on one side, 20 on the other, and I'll have them repeat that 3 times before going in the squats. And believe me, even the biggest squatters in the room, their glutes are going to be cooking. So notice, I'm not laying there in TV watching position with my head under my hand. I'm laying in side lie position. My hips are stacked. My top hip is actually slightly in front of my lower hip, and my front knee is slightly in front of the other knee. Reason being, if you are with an open hip position, you mechanically are in an advantageous position, and it makes the exercise super easy. And you'll see people with like 3 bands around their knees because they're not in the right position. You get in the right position on this with this knee out in front of the other knee, believe me, it'll cook your glutes. No doubt. Seated toe press versus standing toe press. Between these two, seated toe press over here, and you have standing toe press over here. You notice the difference. One's a bent knee position, and this one over here is more straight leg. In general, that seated one, you're hitting more of the soleus. On the standing one, you're getting more of gastroc and soleus. I might have mentioned before you have 2 muscles down here. And sometimes that's confusing to people. But just keep in mind, the musculature works a little differently in a bent knee position than a standing position. You'll find out those differences as you get a little bit deeper into this coursework. Now, here's one for you, a little food for thought. I like something like this, and I have a whole series of these types of exercises. I have a client who comes in, they want to go skiing in Aspen over winter break. Okay, I got to get my knees nice and strong, and I'll do a ton of leg extension, which is great if they're going to go whoosh straight down the mountainside, right? They're going to go straight down. But skiing requires people to traverse back and forth. And so the traversing back and forth places torque across the knees because as you're going back and forth, you have these long things on the knees, and they're creating torque across the body. It's the same thing with snowboarding. So what I like here is we switch to a transverse plane exercise. We have 1 foot on the ground, and we're using the glutes and the musculature across the knees to rotate. So, yep. And then I also have a little deliberate retraction in the shoulder on this one too. I'll protract here, boop, and then I'll retract, and I swing the gait. And that swinging the gait, there's a weight transfer that happens. Let's go back here. There's a weight transfer that goes from the big foot out to the pinky toe, and I'm wobbling pretty good, right? Trying to keep my balance. Swing the gait. And you can literally see my pockets on my shorts rotating out as I'm creating this axis of rotation on the hip and a little bit, very little across the knee and some across the ankle. So what you're really working on this is this lateral aspect of the body, glutes, knee, where the weak links are, right, in skiing. And many times people are just weak in the glutes and they're weak in terms of their knee strength. And instead of doing sagittal plane leg extension, we create a transverse plane environment to get torque across the knee joint. Love it. One of my favorite exercises. I have a whole library of these that I use for people who are going to go skiing, and even like my rehab people who've had a knee issue. I will do a ton of torque related exercises like this just because I don't want the patella smashing against the knee joint on leg extensions over and over and over. So where people normally are lacking, they're lacking in glute and true glute development, right? They're also lacking in hamstrings because they spend a lot of time offloading the work and day-to-day activities to the front of the thigh, and they come in, they do a ton of leg extension and like no leg curl. And so the theme you have is people like working the front side of their body, not so much the back. They'll work chest, they'll work biceps, but they won't work back so much and triceps. They'll work quadriceps, but not so much hamstrings and glutes. So you kind of have to educate your people that you have 2 sides of the body and you got to work both. So with that, folks, I am signing off. You guys have a good one. Be on the lookout for the Check for Learning and the virtual lab assignment. later on.